almost 10 months without another official video. 10 months! Have I been slacking? Not really. I've just been working on a ton of stuff on my main channel. It does feel like I've been neglecting this channel, so why not come back with a bang? That's why I decided to change the name of my channel to something more unique, GCN64. Take notice that I dropped the Wii from my list of available consoles. This is due to my lack of accessibility at times to the Wii. Anyways, back on topic. I started this channel back in 2012 under the name N64 Gamer Reviews, and I've gone almost 3 years without an actual review. So I guess the time has come to finally live up to my channel's name. Welcome to my newest and hopefully most common series, Positive Reviews. The main concept of positive reviews is basically to take any game, whether that be heavily criticized or wildly praised, and I point out all the things that I feel can be positives for the game. The catch being that it has to be a game I enjoy and have a soft spot for. Anyway, the reviews will consist of 5 categories: atmosphere and story, graphics and sound, as in sound effects, music, gameplay, and difficulty. I'll then finish off by giving a percentage of how positive I am that you should play the game at hand. Don't worry, I'll try to make these reviews spoiler-free. And speaking of the game at hand, let's finally take a look at the game I will be reviewing for this first Positive Reviews episode. Let's just say it's a game I've been teasing a review for a very long time. Yes, Shadowgate 64, Trials of the Four Towers, is what I'd like to say is my favorite adventure game, if not favorite game in general, for the Nintendo 64. I first played this game on an emulator, and I don't think I even made it to the first tower, yet for some reason I was in love with this game. I came across a cartridge copy of the game by practically pure luck, since I just so happened to come across it during one of my first trips to our local game store. Shadowgate 64 was developed by Infinite Ventures and published by Kemco. Now I'm sure most of you are very skeptical towards Kemco for publishing such classic failures as Universal Studios Theme Parks Adventure for the GameCube, Daikatana for the N64, and almost all the Bugs Bunny Crazy Castles. But hey, it's always nice to give everyone a chance, no matter the company. Hey, we'll get to some of your positives some other time. So, Shadowgate 64 is an adventure game that focuses a ton on exploration and puzzle solving. It also consists of next to no combat with enemies, so there's a plus right there. If you're someone who's really into exploring your surroundings and not feeling pressured to rush through everything, this game should already be partially on your wish list. Now before we get too far into the positives, let's go ahead and start up our first category. Shadowgate 64 takes place long after the events of the first Shadowgate for the NES. You control the character Del Cottonwood, who for some reason is allowed to live after his caravan is ambushed and the rest of his group is killed. He is then brought into the dungeon of the town known as Castle Shadowgate. Del's first challenge is to escape his dungeon cell, especially considering that according to the dungeon keeper, Del is scheduled to be tortured tomorrow. Eventually, if you manage to escape the cell, you will soon run into the character Lakmir, who is a spirit of an elder sorcerer that explains to you that there is much more to your quest. He informs you about the main villain of the game, Belzar, and his plans to revive the mighty force, Telemar, who is often referred to as the Warlock Lord. It ends up being Del's new goal to travel through the 4 towers found in Castle Shadowgate, and use many of his tools and companions to help stop Belzar from resurrecting Telemar. In the end, however, you will start questioning whether or not you're helping Castle Shadowgate, or just making things worse. The plot is very fun to follow, and you find yourself eager to discover the next event that helps fill in the gaps of the main storyline. The atmosphere of the game is also very enthralling. Shadowgate 64 takes place in a gloomy, medieval-like town. There's little to no bright colors, mostly grays and browns, which creates a depressing atmosphere. Although that may sound negative, it isn't necessarily a bad thing. See, the plot of the game can be seen as dark and eerie, so the depressing atmosphere fits the game so well. The medieval setting also gives you a good sense of the time frame, and roughly how long into the past you are. I normally don't care much for medieval styles, but for whatever reason, there was something about it that kept me playing, even long after I emulated it. But that's not the only reason I feel I've gotten so attached to this game. We still have 4 categories left. Although they may not be impressive at first glance, the graphics are what I feel is the other thing that got me playing Shadowgate 64 over and over again. They are somewhat smudgy and blurry at times, which definitely makes searching for smaller items so much more difficult since those have more of a tendency to blend in. For example, I had no idea this town map was here until I had already finished the game for the first time. But, as tough as this can be, the way the textures are set up fits the first-person perspective nicely. They show just enough detail without being too distracting, and they assist with the eerie atmosphere. One thing about the game's graphics is how surprisingly good the textures are on the NPCs. Sure, the bodies aren't anything special, and the proportions may look weird at times, but the characters' faces are so well created. Each character in the game, with the exception of the guards and some of the graveyard spirits, has their very own unique face. The most interesting graphics of the game, however, are during most cutscenes. Now, aside from a few, a lot of the cutscenes consist of textures that move around to give the impression of 3D. Let's just say it can lead to some rather unintentionally hilarious moments. As for sound effects, this game I would say gets an A+. The sound effects are satisfying and stand out more due to the lack of voices in the game. Some of my personal favorites include any of the door sound effects, and the common select sound. From footsteps to tapping on walls, this game is packed to the brim with so many unique sounds to satisfy your eardrums. See how many different sounds you can discover. Speaking of sounds, let's talk about one of my favorite things in this game, the music. Oh gosh, the music. The music in this game is so amazingly orchestrated. It helps emphasize the different events that go on in the game, whether that be eeriness, drama, fright, awe, sadness, or heck, even mystery and discovery. The music will always be there to assist in giving you a fully cinematic experience. This game nearly tops my list for the best video game soundtrack. My personal favorite song in this game is the track that plays in different areas throughout the game, most notably the Disciples Tower and at the end. I absolutely love this tune so much that I went and created a remix of the song, which can be found either on my other channel, Amax Production, or through the link above. Truly, these masterpieces composed by Saori Kobayashi and Kenosuke Sumura should not go unknown. So go check out DownWithThePlague's channel and listen to all the songs for yourself. Now, it's time to move on to what I feel is probably the most important category of this review. Gameplay is one of those things that can truly determine whether a game is a success or not. If you want your game to take off, you better make sure your controls are easily adaptable and not too confusing. Shadowgate 64 handles this alright. Being that this is a first-person game, it requires two sets of movement controls, and being that the logical D-pad was apparently reserved for Pokemon Stadium only, Shadowgate 64 instead uses the analog stick and all four C buttons. The C buttons control which direction Del travels, and the analog stick controls which way Del is looking. The controls feel odd at first, but over time your brain will learn to adapt. As for the other buttons, A does what it always does. It acts as the main selector button. B brings up your items menu, and while in the items menu, the C-stick also doubles as ways to switch between both your items and books. And the trigger allows Del to crouch, which comes in handy when an item needs to be picked up off the ground. The only button left is the start button, and if you can't even begin to guess what that does, then it's time to play more games. As for the gameplay itself, everything is pretty basic. During the intro stage inside Del's cell, you are given very little to work with, which is a good thing. This intro stage allows you to get used to the controls, and how the game works without putting too much on your plate. The room is small, so there isn't too much to explore. Shadowgate 64 also has a unique save feature. When you save, it'll literally respawn you at the exact spot you're standing. Just try to save often, because even though there isn't any combat, you still can die frequently if you're not careful. Most deaths are caused by falling, consuming, or wearing something dangerous, or sometimes running into the Dungeon Keeper again. As for the rest of the game, you can gain info about what to do next or how to solve certain puzzles by either talking to the people and spirits around Castle Shadowgate, or by reading the various books that can be found throughout all the buildings. Sometimes reading through and trying to interpret all the dialogue can feel tedious and difficult, but let's go ahead and save that for our next and final category. Now, despite being a positive review, this category is where Shadowgate 64 falls short. Shadowgate 64 is a hard game, and I mean really hard. Some of the puzzles are almost impossible to figure out if we didn't have walkthroughs on the web. Like, here's an example. You have these 5 statues, and a combination of 3 of them placed in slots will open a secret doorway. The statues consist of a primitive man, an ape, a fairy, a dwarf, and a normal human, which is already placed in the furthest right slot. So naturally, you'd think the puzzle is a play on evolution, and the order of the statues is ape, primitive man, and normal human. But no, the order for some reason is fairy, dwarf, human. What? And I'm positive none of the books I've collected thus far have explained that. But I could be wrong. Either way, most of the puzzles you can easily get without a problem during your second run through the game. It's just the first playthrough that's the toughest. Don't be surprised if you find yourself checking a walkthrough every so often. I sure had to at times. The difficulty is really the only negative thing I find about this game. I love Shadowgate with all my heart. I mean, I love this game so much I actually wrote pretty much all the Shadowgate 64 content found on the Nintendo Wiki. But I'll never forget how hard that first playthrough was. Getting stuck, getting frustrated, but I still pushed through. I was determined to finish this game that I had begun to love so much. And when you finish it, man, let's just say it sure feels like a crowning achievement. Shadowgate 64 Trials of the Four Towers is an amazing game. It is full of adventure, mystery, and excitement that I still have yet to fully find in another N64 game. This game, this wonderfully underrated game, can bring you so many feelings you didn't know could exist in one game. Sadness, satisfaction, humor, frustration, and most importantly, happiness. Intriguing puzzles, NPCs with great personalities, decent graphics, cinematic soundtrack, and the determination to save Castle Shadowgate, the town you only just met. That is Shadowgate 64, Trials of the Four Towers.